a forgotten diet that changed an entire generation. It began during a time of scarcity, not as a wellness trend, but as a necessity. People ate this way because there was no alternative. And decades later, researchers realized it may have quietly reshaped how an entire generation aged. Today, diet is framed as optimization. Superfoods, macros, supplements, constant adjustment. But to understand why this forgotten approach matters now, we need to return to a period when food was simple, repetitive, and deeply tied to survival. Because the same metabolic pressures we face today were forming then, just without the language to describe them. In the years following economic hardship, one population displayed a strange pattern: lower rates of heart disease, delayed onset of diabetes, fewer inflammatory conditions in old age. At first, these outcomes were attributed to luck or to underreporting, but as records accumulated, a clearer signal emerged. Something about how this generation ate had altered their long-term trajectory. The diet itself was unremarkable. Few ingredients, minimal processing, long gaps between meals. Protein was present, but not dominant. Sugar was rare, not demonized, simply unavailable. Meals were predictable, almost boring. And yet, the biological consequences were anything but. Researchers later realized that this pattern had trained metabolism differently. Insulin responses softened. Cellular repair pathways activated more frequently. The body learned to switch between fuel sources with ease, not because it was instructed to, but because it had no choice. What made this discovery unsettling was its timing. These benefits were not the result of short-term dieting. They were embedded early, during childhood and early adulthood, long before anyone thought about longevity, long before aging felt relevant. And that raised the first uncomfortable realization. Some of the most powerful influences on how we age may already be behind us, shaped quietly, through routines we barely remember, long before we ever start trying to live longer. As scientists dug deeper, they noticed something modern diets rarely allow: recovery. Periods where the body was not constantly processing, digesting, or storing. These long metabolic pauses gave cells time to repair, recycle, and reset. Without naming it, this generation practiced what would later be called metabolic flexibility. They adapted to availability rather than abundance. Hunger was not an emergency. It was expected. And because it was expected, it did not trigger chronic stress responses the way it often does today. The simplicity of the diet removed choice overload. Meals were decided in advance by circumstance, not preference. This reduced cognitive strain and stabilized daily rhythms. Eating happened at consistent times. Sleep followed naturally. The body learned predictability, and predictability reduced internal friction. Over decades, these small advantages compounded. Arteries stayed more elastic. Mitochondria functioned longer. Inflammation remained lower, not eliminated, but controlled. Aging still occurred, but unfolded more slowly, with fewer sharp declines. Yet, the story was not purely biological. Culture reinforced the diet. Meals were social. Eating was slow. Waste was unacceptable. Food carried meaning beyond pleasure. It represented continuity, effort, and respect for limitation. When abundance finally arrived, the pattern broke. Variety exploded. Portions grew. Snacking filled every gap. And within a single generation, the advantages faded. The same families who once aged gently now followed the global curve of metabolic disease. This contrast revealed something critical. It was not any single food that mattered most. It was the structure around eating, the rhythm, the restraint, the absence of constant stimulation. Longevity emerged not from restriction alone, but from consistency. And this realization set the stage for a deeper conflict, because the very conditions that supported this diet are the ones modern life resists most. The conflict lies in desire. Modern food systems are built around abundance, speed, and novelty. Variety is marketed as freedom. Constant access is framed as progress. And restraint is often portrayed as deprivation rather than protection. This makes a forgotten diet difficult to accept, not because it was extreme, but because it was boring. Repetition was normal. Cravings were not immediately satisfied. Eating was shaped by availability, not impulse. In a culture trained to expect instant fulfillment, this feels unnatural. Physiologically, the consequences are profound. Continuous eating keeps insulin elevated. Repair pathways remain suppressed. Inflammation simmers. The body rarely enters states designed for maintenance and cleanup. Aging accelerates not through dramatic damage, but through the absence of recovery. Attempts to recreate the diet in modern contexts often fail. People copy the foods but ignore the structure. They eat similar ingredients but at different times. They snack constantly. They layer stress on top of restriction. The result is frustration, not longevity. This highlights the core tension. The benefits of the old pattern emerge from an environment that enforced limits. Today, limits must be chosen, and chosen repeatedly. That cognitive burden itself becomes a stressor. As researchers debated these findings, a larger question emerged. If aging is shaped by patterns established early, can late-life interventions truly compensate? Or are we trying to correct decades of metabolic noise with short-term discipline? The diet was never meant to be a prescription. It was a consequence of circumstance. Its power came from being unavoidable. And that is precisely why it worked. The deeper conflict, then, is not nutritional. It is cultural. Longevity may require forms of restraint that modern identity resists. And until that tension is addressed, no dietary breakthrough will fully deliver what it promises. The climax of this story is not a food group or a forbidden ingredient. It is the realization that aging responds more to rhythm than to novelty. The body does not need constant innovation. It needs space. When that generation lived within predictable limits, repair became routine. Cells were given time to reset. Systems designed for survival were activated regularly, not occasionally. Longevity emerged as a side effect of living in alignment with biological cycles. The resolution is not a call to return to scarcity. It is an invitation to reintroduce intentional gaps, to allow periods where nothing is consumed, where stimulation quiets, where the body is not asked to perform, but to maintain. Modern longevity conversations often fixate on what to add: more supplements, more protocols, more data. But this story suggests that what we remove may matter more. Constant eating, constant choice, constant metabolic demand. This diet did not make people immortal. It made them resilient. It preserved function longer, not youth forever. And that distinction matters, because resilience determines how long independence lasts, not just how long the heart keeps beating. As we search for solutions in an age of abundance, the lesson grows clearer. Longevity is not built by chasing extremes. It is shaped by respecting limits, by designing lives where recovery is not an afterthought, but a foundation. And if we listen closely, this forgotten diet leaves us with a simple question. In a world where more is always available, can we learn to age better by needing less?